Ibrahim Traoré's words at the microphone were so powerful that the faces of diplomats in the hall turned pale. The French ambassador left the meeting halfway and fled. The British representative started making urgent phone calls. The American consul was looking around in shock as if a bomb had exploded. The 42 journalists, 15 ambassadors from different countries, dozens of cameramen in the hall that day thought they would just watch a routine press conference. But in those 3 minutes, they heard such things that no one was prepared for, because Traoré was about to expose Africa's biggest secret. Before the meeting started, there was a strange tension in the hall. Normally there would be casual conversations at such meetings. Journalists would chat, but that day everyone was silent, as if they sensed something big was going to happen. Traoré's assistants were walking around with mysterious documents. Closed files were placed on tables. At exactly 2:25 p.m., Traoré entered the hall. There was an unprecedented determination on his face. He was holding a thick file. His eyes scanned every diplomat in the hall, one by one, as if saying, "I know who is who." At that moment, everyone realized this would not be an ordinary meeting. As Traoré approached the microphone, there was a silence in the hall where you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was holding their breath because the expression on Traoré's face was very serious. Very determined, he waited 5 seconds before saying his first words. These 5 seconds seemed to last for hours. Then he exploded. The story of this press conference actually began 6 months earlier. Traoré and his special team had decided to investigate the real situation of Burkina Faso. This investigation was conducted so thoroughly that the truths that emerged shocked everyone. Secret agreements from state archives were found. Real clauses of contracts with international companies were discovered. Geological reports, mining extraction documents, export figures, tax records, bank transfers, and most shocking of all, foreign intelligence services. Africa reports everything would be put on the table because Traoré believed that the time for silence was long overdue. Africa's real wealth had been hidden from the world, but now everyone would learn. These documents were so striking that even Traoré's advisors were shocked because no one knew that Burkina Faso was so rich. Even official figures were hidden, concealed from the people. No one knew what would happen if this information spread. But Traoré was determined now. The truths would be spoken. When Traoré approached the microphone, he had documents he had been preparing for 6 months. But these were not ordinary documents. They contained CIA reports, French intelligence documents, secret correspondence of British companies and World Bank's never-published Africa reports. Those documents were so classified that only 3 people could access some of them. How Traoré obtained them? No one knew, but he had them, and he would use them. Thus, documents contained the real wealth figures of Burkina Faso, but not just figures. Also details of how this wealth was stolen, which company stole, how much, which politician took bribes, how which agreement was signed. Everything was documented. The figures were so astonishing that they completely overturned the poor. Africa's story told to the world. The hall was specially prepared that day. Unlike normal press conferences, international media representatives were specially invited. Mark Lowen from BBC, Larry Madovo from CN, Felix Onwa from Reuters, and especially strong names from African media were there because Traoré wanted this message to reach all of Africa. But most importantly, there were diplomats in the hall. French Ambassador Philippe Elliott, British Ambassador James Edward, American Consul Sarah Mitchell, Chinese Ambassador Li Wei, Russian Representative Victor Petro, and others were all there. Because what Traoré would say would concern all of them. The African interests of these countries would be endangered. When Traoré said his first sentence, the hall froze. But this was not an ordinary silence. It was a silence born of tension because everyone was expecting a big announcement. Friends, today I will share the truths with you, because enough is enough. We have listened to the lies told about Africa for 30 years and remained silent, but now it is time to speak. These words instantly changed the atmosphere of the hall. Diplomats started looking at each other. Journalists prepared their pens. Cameras focused because everyone began to wonder what Traoré would say. At that moment, French Ambassador Philippe Leo took out his phone and quickly sent a message, probably warning Paris because he had never heard this tone from Traoré before. This determination, this anger, and most importantly, this confidence was very different, as if he had trump cards in his hand. And then the explosion came. They have been calling us poor for 30 years, but we are not poor. We are one of the richest countries of the richest continent in the world. But this wealth does not stay with us. Those words caused the first shock in the hall because no one expected Traoré to speak. So clearly, panic began among diplomats because this was not just a claim. It was a cry of rebellion. Traoré opened the file in his hand and dropped the first bomb. The amount of gold extracted from Burkina Faso last year was 62 tons. The market value of this gold is exactly $4.3 billion, but the amount left to us is only $350 million. To 91% went. Where did it go? Into whose pocket? As he said, thus figures. Traoré's voice was not trembling. On the contrary, every word came out clearly because he had memorized these figures. He had worked for months, studied their agreements, read every document, checked every figure. Now no one could lie to him because he knew the truths. These figures caused the first shock effect in the hall because no one knew there was such a big difference. But this was just the beginning. Traoré would drop bigger bombs, and the hall felt this tension was at its peak because everyone was waiting for the next announcement. These are only official figures, said Traoré, and his voice became even harder. When we include illegal gold extraction, the figure rises to 100 tons, meaning $6 billion worth of gold leaves our country annually. But we are still considered poor. What kind of mathematics is this? What kind of justice? As he said these words, Traoré's eyes swept the diplomats in the hall one by one, as if he was accusing each of them, as if he was saying with his eyes, "You are also part of this system." These looks were so sharp that some diplomats uncomfortably shifted in their seats. American Consul Sarah Mitchell at that moment took out her phone and started sending urgent messages to Washington, because Traoré's statements were also questioning America's Africa policy. And worse, these statements were being broadcast live to the whole world. Russian Representative Viktor Petrov was smiling because Traoré's words were exposing the West's Africa policy, and this served Russia's interests. But Chinese Ambassador Li Wei was worried because China was also making similar agreements in Africa. Canadian journalist Michelle Thompson quickly started taking notes because these figures would cause great repercussions in the world press. But at the same time, she was afraid because what happens to African leaders after such statements was obvious. History was full of examples of this. British ambassador, James Edward, at that moment whispered something to his assistant, probably telling him to inform London because Traoré's statements seemed to target British companies too. And indeed they did, because Traoré had documents about Rand gold resources in his hands. French Ambassador Philippe Lalliot was now openly uncomfortable, constantly looking at his watch as if looking for a way to escape from the meeting. But Traoré was just getting started. Let's talk about uranium because this is even more shocking. Burkina Faso supplies 5% of the world's uranium production. Our annual production is 2,500 tons. And here comes the shocking truth. With our uranium, 56 nuclear reactors operate in France. 75% of France's electricity comes from our uranium. As he said this sentence, Traoré looked directly at the French ambassador, but 65% of our villages have no electricity. Mulio, this is not irony. This is systematic robbery. Philip Lalliot's face turned red because his name was mentioned and he was being accused in front of the whole world. But he could not respond because what Traoré said was true and everyone knew it at that moment. He thought of getting up and leaving the hall, but cameras were on him. He could not move. Traoré shuffled his documents and took out the second file. Let me show you one more document. This is an official report, a geological survey showing Burkina Faso's underground wealth. This country has 13 different precious minerals: gold, uranium, manganese, zinc, lead, iron ore, boyd, phosphate, vanadium, and many more. According to geological research, the total reserve value is over $850 billion. But why are we shown among the world's poorest countries? This figure caused a complete shock effect in the hall because $850 billion was more than the annual national income of many developed countries. Traoré continued, because we do not control these resources. 90% of the mines are in the hands of foreign companies. Let me give you concrete examples. Ran Gold Resources. British company operates the Lulo gold mine, extracts 15 tons of gold annually, worth $900 million. But the total tax and royalty it pays to Burkina Faso is $30 million. 3%. Is this justice? British Ambassador James Edward at that moment started taking notes because these allegations also concerned Britain. Traoré continued, Engendeva Mining Company operates the Hyundai gold mine. Annual production 20 tons of gold worth $1,200 million. But the share left to our country is $45 million, 4%. Thus, companies extract billions of dollars worth of resources from our lands, but give us only tips. Then, when we are poor, they come and say, we are helping you. Is this system sustainable? Do you think? Thus, questions forced everyone in the hall to think. Traoré took out one of his most striking documents. This is a page from the CIR Africa report. It writes about the real reasons for instability in the Sahel region. It clearly states here that controlled instability policy is implemented in countries with natural resource wealth because they want instability to continue. When there is instability, we cannot protect our resources with the excuse of security. Foreign forces come settle in our country and take control of our resources. The name of this strategy is resource wars. This document made a big noise in the hall because it was an official intelligence report and revealed the real reasons for conflicts in Africa. Traoré continued, where does the financing of Boko Haram, Mujahideen, and other armed groups come from? I have French intelligence services reports. According to these reports, 75% of armed groups in the Sahel region survive with external support. They have modern weapons, vehicles, regular money flow. So who finances these groups and why? This question caused a bomb effect in the hall because everyone began to wonder about the answer. Traoré gave the answer because they want chaos to continue. When there is chaos, we cannot unite, we cannot strengthen, we cannot protect our resources. That is why every African country has problems with its border neighbors. Is this a coincidence? There are French soldiers in Mali, American base in Niger, French garrison in Chad, German, soldiers in Cameroon. Wherever there are resources, there are Western soldiers. Is this also a coincidence? Does observations begin to change everyone's perspective on Africa? In the hall, Traoré moved to historical examples. Let me remind you of the history of African leaders. Thomas Sankara made a revolution in my country, educated his people, established health services, gave rides to women, planted trees, fought against desertification, and most importantly rejected IMF loans, tried to stand on his own feet. What happened? He was killed on October 15, 1987. Who killed him? Official investigation was never conducted, but everyone knows who killed him because Sankara was trying to change the system. They did not want this system to change. This historical fact affected everyone in the hall because Sankara was one of Africa's most beloved leaders. Card continued, "What did Patrice Lumumba try to do in Congo after independence? Use his country's uranium and cobalt mines for his people? Cancel agreements with Belgian companies. What happened? He was killed 6 months later. CIA documents contain details of Lumumba's assassination. CIA agent Lawrence Devlin had sent poisoned toothpaste to kill Lumumba. The FBI published these documents in 2000. It is now 2020 official. What did Laurent Gbagbo do in Ivory Coast? He tried to break the French company's cocoa monopoly, tried to process the raw material of chocolate into value-added products. What happened? He was overthrown in 2011. Now he is being tried in the H. Thus examples completely changed the atmosphere in the hall. Everyone was waiting for Traoré's next example. What did Muammar Gaddafi try to do in Libya? He wanted to switch to gold diner in Africa, tried to sell oil without dollars, tried to strengthen the African Union. What happened? He was killed with NATO bombs. In 2011, Libya was turned into ruins. Africa's most developed country collapsed. Now, there are slave markets in Libya. Is this a coincidence or a systematic plan? Traoré took out the most striking document. This is a copy of one of Hillary Clinton's emails published on WikiLeaks. It clearly states here that Gaddafi's gold diner threatens France's interest in Africa. Therefore, it must be stopped. This is the truth, friends. We are not poor. We are kept poor. Our resources are stolen, then given back to us under the guise of aid. The name of this system is neo-colonialism, modern slavery system. Traoré continued raising his voice. But the game is over. Now, Africa is awakening. Leaders are starting to speak the truths. Mali's Migwa said no to the system. Niger's military junta that overthrew Mohamed Bazoum closed the French base in South Africa. The ANC party is reviewing mining agreements of Western companies in Ghana. Gold mines are being nationalized in Zambia. Copper mines are being taken under state control. Now no one can put our resources in their pocket and throw us bread. As Traoré approached the end of his speech, he made his strongest statements. I promise you within the next 5 years, all natural resources of Burkina Faso will be under the control of our people. We will review all agreements made with foreign companies. No one can put our gold in their pocket and give us tips anymore. No one can generate electricity with our uranium and leave us in darkness. No one can make T-shirts with our cotton and sell them to us 10 times more expensive because we have seen the game. I call out to all African peoples watching this video, wake up, stand up. Remember that you are the real owners of your resources. No foreign power can have more say than you in your land. And when Trudeau moved away from the microphone, the hall was silent. With the shock of the speech that had been going on for exactly 3 minutes, no one applauded because everyone was trying to digest what they heard. These 3 minutes had really destroyed the 30-year lie. What happened after the press conference? Western media almost never broadcast these images. BBC only gave a 30-second news. CNN did not give any. France 24 remained silent, but African media exploded. From South Africa to Kenya, from Nigeria to Morocco, all African channels made this speech the main news on social media. The video was watched 10 million times. African peoples finally learned the truth. A week after this speech, the Burkina Faso government decided to review agreements with foreign mining companies. A month later, France's largest base in Africa was closed. 6 months later, Burkina Faso, Somalia, and Niger established a military alliance. That is why Traoré's 3-minute speech was not just a press conference, it was Africa's independence manifesto. And after this manifesto, nothing would be the same because now the truth had come out.